Thank you. Thank you, Paolo, Emilio, for the invitation. I'm very excited to be here today and to speak about search and antitrust. I would say that a bit like justice, I've decided to focus not on data, but more about the question of integration between search engine, think Google, and complementary websites. So this is very common. I mean, we've seen lots of examples: Google Maps, Google's integrated in video, finance, Google Flights, Google Shopping, and so on and so forth. And this has been a very prominent issue in the eyes of regulators and competition authorities. For instance, in 2013, you had the FTC investigating Google about search bias and in the end dropping the investigation. More recently, European Commission, as just mentioned. So today, in this presentation, I want to focus on basically two questions at kind of a conceptual level in terms of the effects of integration on the market. The first one, which is a potential area of concern, is whether integration between a search engine and a complementary site will lead the search engine to promote inferior products. Right? This is a big area of concern. And that's very often put forward by authorities. And the second one, which is also important, is whether integration affects firms' incentives in a way that will be harmful to consumers. So I will say a few words about each of these issues, and I will also try to shed light on whether we should expect market forces to prevent harmful behavior, to the extent that if the answer to one of the two questions is yes, so integration would lead the search engine to behave badly, well, is that enough to say, well, we should regulate, or should we rely on market forces to kind of solve the issue? So I'm very lucky because this is exactly my research area, so I didn't have much preparation to do in terms of the content. So I'll quickly go over two papers that I've written with Greg Taylor, who's my colleague at the University of Oxford. So most of what I'm going to say is you can also blame Greg for that. Right. So the first paper that I want to talk about is one in which we focus on the question of investment and foreclosure in relation to integration between a search engine and a downstream website. I think it's pretty uncontroversial to say that this is a first-order concern for regulators, for antitrust authorities. So, for instance, there's this quote that we've been using from Joaquin Almunia a couple of years ago, at the time when Google and the European Commission had kind of found an agreement through which Google was committed to display competitors' results more prominently. And basically, the Commission's point of view was that such an agreement would be good for Google because it would give both Google and its rivals an incentive to innovate and improve their offerings. So, in a sense, objectivity, so bias, to put it differently, bias would be bad for investment incentives across the board, so both for Google and for rivals. It's a position that's been maintained, at least partially. I mean, if you read the European Commission statement of objections, the recent one, there's this sentence that says that Google's conduct, basically biasing results in favor of its own affiliate websites, has a negative impact on consumers and innovation. Well, to some extent, those claims make sense, but yet there is no formal model in the economic literature. So don't worry, I'm not going to present the formal model. But basically, our aim in the projects was to investigate whether those claims are actually backed up by some sort of theory. Is there a consistent mechanism that confirms those claims, and whether we're not forgetting something? So might there be something else going on? So here is the basic picture of the market, of the simplified market that we consider. We consider a market in which you have two downstream websites, website 1 and website 2, that are vertically differentiated. So they have to decide how, they have to invest in quality, basically, and they provide the same service, but with a different quality. So think of Google Maps and MapQuest, or say two independent map providers. And you have two kinds of consumers. Some consumers to the right, so they are informed. So basically they have had previous exposure to the market, so they know which map provider is better, so they can go directly to either website 1 or website 2, depending on which one gives them the highest utility. But there's a role for a search engine in the sense that you have a bunch of consumers who are not informed, and so they go to the search engine and they say, well, okay, I'm looking for a map of Rome or whatever, and then the search engine will display a map. And so what we do in the paper, we compare two situations, one in which the search engine is neutral and objective and committed to always displaying the better map. So it's able to say, well, okay, this map is clearly better, so we're going to show it. And we compare this situation of objectivity to a situation in which the search engine is integrated with one map provider and always directs those consumers toward that website. So this is what I've represented on the slide. Okay, so he sends everybody towards website 1. Now there are two important assumptions in the paper. The first is that the investment in, so firms compete in quality, not in prices, so they choose how much to invest in the quality of their product, and it's a kind of a fixed cost in the sense that it doesn't depend on how many users you serve, so it's more like, okay, we're going to invest in a better algorithm, or we're going to send trucks to take pictures of every road in every city, or you can think of many other examples. But really the crucial assumption, which I think makes sense in this context, in many contexts, is that an improvement in the quality of one website allows that website to increase its per user revenue. So every time, so if Google Maps is better, you can imagine that advertisers are willing to pay more to appear on a given search because consumers are going to be able to find what they want maybe more easily. Or if you think about YouTube and the investment, I mean, recently I've noticed that once a video stops, then they put another one automatically, which I think is a fairly new feature. So there's an investment in terms of, okay, we're going to try to find a good algorithm that predicts what you might like. And so if this algorithm becomes better, then basically a user will spend more time on YouTube and will be exposed to more ads as well. Right, so this is the important assumption of the paper. And briefly, I'm going to go over the three main results of the paper in terms of the comparison between integration and objectivity. So the first one, which kind of confirms the concerns of some of the concerns of the Commission, for instance, is that website 2, so the website that is not integrated, invests less under integration than when the search engine is objective. On the other hand, it's not clear at all that the integrated website will invest less, and in fact we show we have conditions under which the integrated website, so Google Maps, will be of better quality if it's integrated than it would be absent integration. And another result is that the integrated websites will tend to be of a better quality than website 2. So just very quickly to give you an intuition of this result, when there's no integration, you have two incentives to invest. There's two reasons why you want to improve your quality. The first one, kind of the marginal effect, is that by investing more in your quality, basically you improve your ranking. If the search engine is objective, you improve your quality, so you're more likely to be displayed prominently, and we've seen that prominent position gives you more traffic. So that's the first incentive to invest. Now the second incentive, which is the inframarginal incentive, is that for a given market share, because of this important assumption that quality increases the website's per user revenue, so if you have an existing traffic, you want to, by investing more, you exploit that traffic and you generate more revenue. Now, what happens when the website integrates with the search engine? Well, then it kills the first incentive for both firms, because now rankings are no longer dependent on the relative quality. So no firm has that marginal incentive disappears. But the second incentive actually is affected in an asymmetric way, in the sense that website 2 now knows that it will never get access to the consumers who use the search engine. So it has a lower traffic. Whereas the integrated website has some sort of guaranteed traffic, which it can then use. And because it knows that it will recoup part of its investment over this traffic, then that gives it an incentive to invest more. And so this is what explains the first results, the three results. So let me briefly discuss those results. First one, so I said there's foreclosure of website 2. So it can be partial foreclosure in the sense that website 2 just invests less than it would be if the search engine was objective. But it can also be complete foreclosure. And an interesting result of the paper is that this can happen even though the share of uninformed consumers, so basically the power of the search engine, is very small. So in some circumstances, just a small asymmetry can generate a small asymmetry in the situations to begin with in costs, or can generate a very different outcome and can lead to complete foreclosure. Now, the second result is that the integrated website's quality can increase, and so integration may make consumers better off, even though this might not be expected. And it depends on returns to scale. So these are not the returns to scale that Hal was alluding to, in the sense that we're not really talking about data. We're talking about, okay, if you have an installed base of consumers, then you're more willing to invest because you can recoup this investment over a larger user base. And now this is obviously an empirical question of whether those returns to scales are high enough to justify the fact that the quality might be greater. Now, another point which is related to the third result that I had. The third result was that website 1 invests more than website 2. So what this means is that even though the search engine is biased ex ante in the sense that it favors its own websites, ex post, if you look at the qualities, the search engine is making the right recommendation. Okay? Because the integrated website invests more, so yeah, it's better, so we recommend it. So in a sense, if you want to measure bias, it's a tricky issue, because you can't just take the final results at face value. You have to think about the incentives to begin with. And this has I think an interesting implication in terms of the potential effect of competition. Now, suppose that we're in a setup in which the quality, so the setup in which we're concerned about this integration, so suppose that the quality decreases because the returns to scale are not that high. Now, Google always says, well, competition is one click away. So, there can be another website and, yeah, people will switch and this will discipline them. But actually, in this framework, it's not clear at all that this works very well, in the sense that if there is a search engine that wants to enter the market, so it enters a market in which website 1 is of higher quality than website 2. So if you want to enter the market and make an objective recommendation, you have to recommend website 1. So that the dominant search engine in the end is not really hampered by competition. So in a sense, it's a double-edged sword. So that on the one hand, integration may not be bad, but on the other hand, when it's bad, it seems like competition will not really solve the issue. And so we argue in the paper that this framework is also useful in terms of thinking about the Android issue, which I don't have time to talk about, but basically, even though from a legal point of view it may be different because we're talking about contracts that allegedly force manufacturers to exclude rivals, but in terms of the economics, we think it's that is pretty well captured by the model. Right, now I want to talk about a slightly different aspect of the question, which is advertising. So in the model I've talked about, basically advertising is in the background, and we don't really focus on that. But in some context, I mean, Hans spent a lot of time showing that, yeah, the ads do matter in terms of the difference between several search engines. So advertising may be can be a first order concern in some context, and they affect consumer welfare in a significant way. So I can give you two examples in which one would assume that advertising has an opposite effect. So in terms of shopping, so you're looking for running shoes. So basically, you're going to go to Google. You're going to see ads, but you like it because you want to buy shoes. And if Google sends you towards another website, you're going to see other ads, and you also like it. But on the other hand, when you watch videos, you're probably going to be bothered when between two Taylor Swift songs you have this trailer for Transformers or whatever, and that's not what you want to be exposed to. So one question that we study in the other paper is how integration affects the equilibrium in the advertising side of things. So we have kind of a very similar structure, which I tend to think is good, so that you have a search engine that can send consumers towards one of two websites. The difference is that now we pay much more attention to the other side of the market, the advertising side of the market. And now you have advertisers that can display ads both on the search engine result page directly, and also they can reach the consumers on the website 1 and website 2. And so there's a certain degree of substitutability between reaching a consumer, between buying ad space on the search engine and buying ad space on one of the two websites. So just to give you an example, here's a search for car insurance. And so you see that you are exposed to different kind of results. On the right-hand side, you see many ads for insurance companies. But on the left-hand side, you see links both to Google Compare, which also contains links to advertisers. So basically, you're on both those links, and if you click on either this link or this one or those two, you're going to also see ads. And so we think it's plausible that advertisers view those two ways of reaching consumers are pretty close substitutes, right? You care about reaching a consumer. You don't really care about whether they click first or second. So to some extent, there's a strong degree of substitutability, which is not always the case. Just a comment. In the previous model, it was more about a model of pure vertical integration, in the sense that you have the search engine which supplies input to the downstream firms, without which they can't really operate. So the input is eyeballs. Whereas in this one, there is both. When the search engine integrates with one website, there's both a vertical dimension, so the same one. So there's the search engine supplies eyeballs to the websites. But there is also now a horizontal integration dimension, in the sense that both the search engine and the website with which it integrates sell ad space to the same people, to the advertisers. Okay, so and this is going to bring new results. So in the model, we assume that the search engine and the websites choose the quantity of advertising that they display. You could write a model in which they choose the prices. It doesn't matter much. Now, two important caveats. The first one is that we assume that the search engine is in a monopoly position. It's essential for consumers. So consumers have they cannot go, basically, if they're looking for some shopping, they cannot go to Amazon or to eBay. So I agree, this is not the right assumption to make when you want to make policy prescription, right? But just to kind of understand what's going on and the incentives. And I'll come back to competition after. And the second caveat, which is less important, is that we don't allow advertiser websites to buy ad space from the search engine in a model. But yeah, this doesn't really matter. So the main results, the first one is kind of very expected is that integration between website 1 and the search engine will lead the search engine to send more consumers towards website 1. Okay, so this is just search bias. Okay, so if the websites are differentiated, the search engine will send slightly too many consumers towards that website. Now, the second and probably more interesting result, if we want to think about also the implications in terms of shopping and other examples, is that because if you think about it as a merger, as a horizontal merger, you now have two suppliers of ad space that merge with each other, so they're going to restrict the quantity of ad space that they supply. Okay, this is simple, the usual logic of horizontal merger. So you internalize the cross price effect, and so this means that on average consumers see fewer ads following integration. Now, if the value of the marginal advertiser is greater than the attention cost of having an extra advertiser, then consumers may benefit from integration. To put it differently, so if consumers dislike ads, well, integration is good because you see fewer ads, and so that's fine. And also, endogenously, the integrated website becomes better than the non-integrated website because it restricts its ad space. If not, so if consumers like advertising, then consumers are more likely to be hurt by integration because they will be exposed to fewer ads. Now, once again, let's take the least favorable case for the search engine, and let's assume that consumers like ads, so that the merger would be bad. Should we regulate, or is competition one click away? Well, then. It's unlike the first model I presented. In this case, an objective search engine could quickly gain market share if there really are low switching costs between search engine. If a search engine gains a reputation of providing links towards better websites, because now website 1, the integrated website, is worse than website 2. So if you're an entrant, on the search engine business and you provide more links to website 2, then you're going to get a reputation of being of better quality, and presumably this is going to put a limit in terms of how biased the search engine can be and how much it can restrict the supply of ad space. Right, and yeah, just want to say thank you.